Welcome to the Snort lab. So before we actually start the lab, I would like for you to understand the underlying architecture and how things have been set up. So to start with, this is your virtual machine. So this is the Kali Linux virtual machine that you have installed on your system. Now within this machine, here is your terminal. This is where you run commands. So for example, you can run nmap, ping, whatever you want to do. And then we have another container. We have a Docker container which is running Nginx. So Nginx is basically a sort of like a lightweight web server. So you can think of a Docker container as a lightweight portable mini computer that runs only the applications and tools it needs, nothing more. So we have an Nginx container which is running. Now coming to this Docker. So Docker 0 is the interface through which basically Kali Linux or other external systems are going to talk to this. So you can think of it as sort of like a virtual network interface. So all of the traffic between Kali Linux and this container would have to pass through this Docker 0 interface. It's a default bridge. And here we have Snort, which is our IPS. So Snort can act as both an IDS or an IPS, depending on how you configure it. Now the way that we have set up is that Snort is going to listen to this interface, Docker 0. So Snort is going to actively listen to this interface and monitor all of the communication which is happening between the Kali Linux terminal and the Docker container. Now let's talk about the IP addresses. So this container has an IP address of 172.17.0.2. And whatever traffic that Kali Linux is sending, so basically when you're sending anything from this Kali Linux terminal to the container, it's going to appear to be coming from 172.17.0.1. But now, before you can actually go ahead and start using Snort, you need to define the rules. So basically, what should exactly Snort listen for and alert for? So let me give you an example. So in this example, this basically specifies that it's an alert. So basically, you could alert, you could block, you could do a couple of actions. But generally speaking, we use the alert directive. Then this specifies the protocol. So basically, we're talking about TCP protocol. Source IP is anyone from any port. So any source IP, any source port. And then this is the direction, which basically tells that it has to be from any to 172.17.0.2. So basically we're talking about traffic that is going in this direction, not in this direction. Okay. If you want Snort to listen to both, you can also use the bidirectional directive. Okay. Now moving on, this is the destination IP address, which is this one. And this is the port. So this is the port on which if Snort sees the traffic, it is going to generate an alert. And then the message is basically whatever you want. So in case of Snort rules, there's one more thing that you need to add. So basically after message, you would also need to add a SID, which is basically a unique ID. Usually the pattern is 1 and then 5 zeros and then 1, and then the next, for the next rule you have to use 2, for the next rule you have to use 3, and so on. So now if I go to this Kali Linux terminal and I run the command, so nmap -p for port 22 and then the destination IP address, then what's going to happen is that this terminal, this Kali Linux, is going to send some traffic across this Docker 0 interface to this IP address, which is this one. Okay. And since Snort is already listening to this interface, it's going to compare this traffic against this rule. And since this is going to match because it's coming from any network and any port, so yes, this will appear to come from this IP address and any port. And then is it going to 172.17.0.2? So yes, it is going to 172.17.0.2. And then is it port 22? Yes, it's port 22 because in nmap we specified port 22. In this case, Snort is going to generate this alert message, SSH port scan. So this is how the lab has been set up. I'm going to go ahead and give you an actual demo, and then there is a lab exercise which you need to complete hands-on, and there's a small challenge in it. So let's proceed. Okay, let's start with the demo. Let's go to full screen mode. Just a heads up, if you're not seeing this labs folder on the desktop and your desktop background is also different from this one, then most likely you're using the old virtual machine. Please note that we have an updated virtual machine. So please go to section 2, network security, in which we have separate video lectures on how to install VirtualBox and then set up the new Kali VM. So we have a separate lecture which covers installation instructions on Windows machines and a separate video lecture which covers installations on Mac OS machines. So please follow those instructions and make sure that you have the latest VM setup. So basically we're going to open a terminal. Let me zoom in. So as always, we first need to go to desktop/labs folder. Okay, and then we need to run sudo /mainscript.sh Kelly, and now we're going to pick Snort IDS lab number 3. As always, please just beware, we may have changed the order of the labs or added more labs. In this one, it's 3. Now it is giving you two options. Start everything from scratch, which basically means that we're going to overwrite rules, and pick this option if it's your first time. So this is the option that we need. There's another option also, reset everything except rules. So we're going to go with option 2 when we basically add our own rules, and we don't want those rules to be overwritten, because when you pick option 1, it's going to start everything from scratch and write the default rule. However, since we're just starting the lab, so the first time we have to go with option number 1. Okay, then the script is going to automatically verify whether all the required dependencies and everything is installed or not. And here you can see that Snort has basically started. It has parsed a bunch of packages, it has a lot of initializations, but at the end you're going to see something like this, ++0 docker 0. Now one thing which you need to understand is the actual command which Snort ran. If you scroll to the top, you're going to see this starting Snort, and here is the command that we actually ran. Okay, let me just break down this command for you. Now this command was automatically run by the script. However, if you want, you can always kill this script, this Snort version, and launch Snort yourself as well if you want more customization or more advanced labs. But let me just quickly go over what do we mean by this. And always remember, when you're doing it yourself, you have to use sudo. Okay, so sudo snort -c basically means that this is the configuration file that you should use. Don't worry, this is the default configuration file. In Kali Linux, it's always here, so you don't need to worry too much about this one. It just means that load this configuration file. Now this is the interesting part. -r basically means load all the rules at the given path. Now if you specify just this path, okay, for Snort all the rules are in etc Snort rules. Now if you stop here, then it's going to recursively load all the rules. However, to keep the lab very simple, we don't want to use hundreds and thousands of rules which are already there. We want to basically observe behavior when we add one rule, two rule, or just a few rules, so that the concept is crystal clear to you. So we have a file that we have created which is local.rules, and this file has just one rule. Let me just quickly show that file to you. So here's this file. There is just one rule in it. Alert TCP. This is the source IP from any port. So if you recall, this is coming from Kali Linux and it's going towards the Nginx Docker container, the web server, which has the IP address of 172.17.0.2, and this is listening on port 21, and this is saying nmap scan to FTP port 21 detected, and flag S basically means it's a TCP sync packet, and then this is the ID. So always remember, for every rule you have to provide this SID, and it has 1 and then 5 zeros, and then you can go from 1, 2, 3, 4, and you have to use a unique SID for every rule. Going back to the main window, So we were discussing the snort command, right? Snort, then configuration file, then what is the rule or the rule directory? Since we are specifying a specific rule, so it's just going to load this file, which has just one rule. And then -i docker 0 is the interface. So if you recall, we discussed that docker 0 is the default interface through which the container talks to everything outside. Then -a is basically alert. We are using the mode alert fast, which basically means that we need alerts very quickly. Otherwise, a typical way of using Snort or configuring Snort is that it writes to a log file, which you can then use top commands or other techniques to view. And then here we are just specifying some flags, which basically tells Snort, don't worry about checksum, because we are within a VM, and checksum is just basically sort of like checking whether the packet has, any modifications or something that has changed in the packet, but that's fine in this case. Okay, now coming to the bottom. Okay, coming here. So everything looks good. Please pay attention. You won't be able to type anything in this window. So you'll always have to either open a new tab or you can just go to the tab that we already opened. Okay. Now the next thing that we want to do is that we want to trigger this rule. What we want is that when we do an nmap port scan of port 21 of the Docker container, which is running Nginx, this one, then we want Snort to basically create an alert. So let's do that. So nmap and then minus port 21 and then 172.17.0.2. There you go. So we just scanned one port, and by the way, this port is closed. And by default, it's always a TCP scan. So nmap done, one IP address. There you go. Now let's go to Snort. There you go. Nmap scan to FTP21 port detected. And it's also showing you the traffic. Okay, so it's TCP 172.17.0.1 and from this actual port to destination, the victim 172.17.0.2 and port 21. So this basically shows how Snort is actively listening to interfaces and it can detect all sorts of malicious traffic. Let's continue with the lab. Now, just to be clear, this rule won't be triggered if we are doing a port scan of any other port. For example, let's do it for port 22. Sometimes you have to wait for a couple of seconds, but yeah, this is enough. So as you see, there is nothing. So it will only work for port 21 because that's what you have defined in your rule. Okay. So let me clear the screen. Now we're going to proceed. We're going to add a new rule because I want to show you the complete process of how we add rules and then how we relaunch the lab, because that's what you're going to be doing in the hands-on practice activity. Okay, so you need to do sudo elevated privileges. Then you need to specify that I want to use the Vim editor to edit the file, etc. Snort rules and local dot rules. Kelly. Okay, just remember to press I, the character I on your keyboard. This would make it open for insertion. Otherwise, if you type something, it won't just work here in Vim editor. Not a very user-friendly editor, by the way. Okay, now we are going to create a new rule. Now, the rule that I want to create is basically to detect ping traffic. So sometimes attackers, they can use ping to find out if a system is up and running, and sometimes they can even leverage ping to launch a denial of service attack. Okay, so we want Snort to pick up any ping traffic or ping sweep done on the destination. So we'll always start with alert, and then ping basically uses ICMP protocol. So in this case, we are talking about ICMP protocol. We are not interested in TCP protocol. Now we can make this rule as flexible, as generic, or as specific. We can specify that exactly coming from this IP, or you can even do any network or any IP and any port, but ending up on 172.17.0.2. Now the thing here is that obviously it's very tempting to put everything like any and any here, but the issue is that you're going to get a lot of false positives. So you're seeing the output here, it's very clean because we're just using one rule. and we triggered it. But in reality, you'll probably have hundreds and thousands of rules in an actual production level Snort deployment, and it's going to create so many false positives. It's also going to detect actual attacks, but the thing is that there are just so many false positives that it's very cumbersome to go through all of them. So it's always nice to be very precise with your rules. But anyways, since this is a VM and we won't be getting traffic from anywhere else, so we can keep it any for now. I also want to showcase that this also works. Now ICMP doesn't really understand ports, so you have to keep it open any. Now message ping sweep detected. Always remember to put this semicolon and then SID. You have to put it 5 zeros, and let's use 4 because we've already used 3. So let's use 4 here. Okay, let's terminate the brackets. So once you're done with editing, so Vim is a bit tricky. So the way to save files is that press escape once, then colon WQ. If you notice here, colon WQ and then press enter. Okay. But now we want to check whether Vim actually saved the rule, everything is working or not. So what we have to do is we have to cat basically displays the contents of the file, etc. snort rules local dot rules. I think it looks okay. So alert ICMP any going to this IP on any port because it's ICMP, so it doesn't care about ports. And this is the message. Okay. Now here's the tricky part. The thing is that we already have this Snort running, but at that point when it started, it read all the rules from local.rules. And at that point, it just had one rule. So the clean way to do is to just close this tab, open a new tab maybe, and then just relaunch the lab. Okay. Kelly, once again, 3. But now please pay attention, don't pick one, otherwise it's just going to initialize that local.rules file and you'll have to redo. So in this case, we want to reset everything. So for example, it's going to stop the existing Snort app. It's going to, do a bit of cleanup in the background and then relaunch everything, but it's not going to touch the rules file. Okay. So we're going to go with option number 2. Okay, now Snort is listening on once again. If I scroll up, you can see the command that it ran. There you go. So once again, the local.rules file, but now it has 2 rules, okay? Now you can't do anything in this window, so you can probably switch to the other tab. Now what we want to do is that we want to trigger this rule. And how do we trigger it? From Kali Linux, we basically want to ping 0.2. Okay, so it seems to be working. It's sending packets and receiving responses. So you can press Ctrl plus C to stop it. I think that's more than enough. Let's go to Snort. There you go. Ping sweep detected. Ping sweep detected. Excellent. So it's coming from Kali Linux going to the Nginx container. So now you have practiced with 2 different rules, how to configure Snort and what do the rules actually mean. Now we have just used 2 rules, but in real life, an actual production level Snort may have thousands of rules. But obviously the downside is that once again, it may have a bit of false positives. I'm going to quickly go over the lab so that you're a bit familiar with what you need to do. So the purpose of the lab is that we're going to demonstrate how Snort basically works. And the prerequisite is, as always, you need to go to desktop/labs folder, run this script, the main script, which is going to fetch all the list of labs. From that list, you have to pick Snort IDS lab option. And once you pick Snort IDS lab option, then you're going to see this. So basically, these are all the steps that we just discussed. But just for your understanding, I'll just go over them once again. Now, since you'll be starting it for the first time, so you'll enter 1. It's going to start everything from scratch, overwrite rules. Now, the first step is that you need to check the first rule, which is already existing once the lab starts. Is it working or not? If you recall that FTP port scan, port 21. So open a new tab of the terminal. So you have to open a new tab of the terminal because the tab that you were using for launching this lab, it would have Snort listening. So you won't be able to do anything. Just open a new tab and then run the following command. So you're doing an nmap on port 21 to the victim or the destination nginx container. And you should see this output, which we already saw. So step 2 was what we did, basically adding a new rule. So you have to open a new terminal tab if you want, and then you have to do sudo vim editor. It's a vim editor, but you just use vi and then the path of the file, local.rules. You have to go to the new line at the end of the current rule, then press I key. It's going to open the insert mode, and then you have to write this rule, alert ICMP any that we just discussed. And please remember, you have to use a unique SID. Once you're done with everything, press escape key and then :WQ and press enter. And you also need to sort of like check, did this thing actually work or not? Editing with Vim. So you have to do sudo cat and then the file name. It's going to display the contents of the file. Now, before you proceed, because you have updated the rules, so you need to relaunch Snort. So for that, close the old Snort tab, open a new tab, and now relaunch the lab. But this time we'll go with option 2. So starting once again, sudo /main script. I apologize, it seems to be a bit repetitive, but just to be very clear. So you have to pick Snort IDS lab, and since you just want everything to restart except the rules, so you'll pick option 2, and then you'll do a ping and you'll see the same output that we saw. Okay, so far so good. This is what we already covered. Now here's your challenge. For the following, you need to follow the same steps as at the start of the lab for editing, saving the file, and then relaunching the lab. But you have to pick option 2 if you're doing it after editing the rules file. Now, what I would recommend is try to write both these rules in one go, save them, and then relaunch the lab. Otherwise, you'll have to do it separately for this one and for this one. Now, the first rule that we want you to write is that it should alert on an nmap port scan of SSH port 22 of the nginx web server container. And it should display the message alert nmap scan detected on SSH 22. And please remember, you have to provide a different SID in the rule. Please just make sure that you're using a different SID compared to the first rule. Okay. So the second rule that you need to write is that it should alert on the ping reply. So when you send that ping command from Kali Linux towards the container also replies back automatically. So when we ping 172.17.0.2, which is the nginx container, Kali Linux basically is pinging the nginx container, and we already have detection for that. But we want also an alert on the automatic reply that is coming from the container to Kali Linux. So you have to keep in mind that for every ping request, the destination responds with a ping reply. And we want an alert on that. Let me just quickly show that to you. So when we're here and we're writing ping 172.17.0.2, this is going to send a ping request to this container, and then there is an automatic response from this container, this nginx container, towards this Kali Linux. Okay, and all of this is passing through this Docker 0 interface. So you have to write a rule to detect this one. The traffic, the ping traffic, the ping reply coming from container towards Kali Linux. And the message should be alert ping reply detected. And please remember to use the correct SID. Just keep in mind there are like 5 zeros. Okay, just please try this lab, try to complete it. And if you face any issues, we're going to discuss the solution in the next lecture.